Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the deep end. This is the deep end of the pool. You better have your swim fins on or be able to swim. This is Mahadeva, the Thunder Wizard. So I'm here to tell you that nothing is impossible. Absolutely nothing is impossible except for narcissistic, destructive consciousness evolving. So any of you who might think that you live in a world where there are evil, powerful beings out there that are trapping you, it's impossible. That can't happen. Everything else you can imagine is possible, especially your ability to create your own world. You have that ability to create your own world. And I'm here to tell you, if your world is miserable, if you are filled with pain, sadness, loneliness, poverty, illness, the bad news is you created it. Here's the good news, though. The good news is if you created it, you can reverse it. And so it is a good idea to think about absolutely everything that you want, everything that will make you happy, because that is possible. Whatever world you can imagine literally is possible. What makes me say that? Well, sometime after 2012, the Earth moved 73,000 light years across the galaxy. And the entire solar system went with it. Don't believe me? All you have to do is try and find where we are in the galaxy. And if you try to look that up, you'll find out that we used to be 73,000 light years away on the other side of the galaxy than we are now. And everything that we had heard way back in 2012, that the current world was going to come to an end and that a new world would replace it, that actually did happen. It's just taken a little while for some of the effects to start kicking in. So, on that note, I want to talk to you about how to interact in higher dimensions, because we talk about moving to this higher fifth dimension and moving to 5D. And that is a very interesting subject, especially when you look into the actual science of higher dimensions and what that means for our ability to function. It becomes very interesting when you look at what human beings are going to be capable of doing as a result of moving into a higher dimension. By the way, when our Earth shifted 73,000 light years to where it is now, we actually moved twice as close to the center of our galaxy, which is, for lack of a better word, that is God. The closer you get to the center of the galaxy, the closer you get to the ultimate, infinite, divine power. So we are 50% closer than we were in 2012, which means that we have at least twice as much. If it's probably much more than that, but at least we have twice as much power to connect to our infinite divinity. We have twice as much power to create our own lives. If you look at anything that's happening in our new reality, you will see that reality is shifting, which means we live in a dream. We don't live in a matrix. We don't live in a prison. We live in a dream. And if you decide to take control of your dream, you can have absolutely anything you can desire. If, however, you choose to believe that you are being controlled, manipulated, held hostage, then that is the dream that you will create. So it is completely up to you. Sounds very, very easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it is incredibly simple. Simple is not always easy, however. Today we're going to be talking about how do higher dimensional beings have the ability to communicate simultaneously with infinite numbers of people. So if you happen to be somebody that works with the Archangel Michael, if you work with deities, if you chant to Shiva or to Krishna, or if you pray to Jesus, or you work with light beings, if you believe that you have the ability to interact with higher dimensional forces, aliens, what have you, spirit guides, how is it that they have the ability to communicate simultaneously to an infinite number of people? Have you ever thought about this? People just, like me, I mean, I was a religious person when I was a little kid, and you just assume, well, God is everywhere, God is omnipresent, but you don't really think about it. You don't really think about, well, how is that possible? How can one consciousness be everywhere simultaneously? Well, the answer to that question happens to be in physics, science, not spirituality, not New Age spirituality, not pseudo-spirituality, in science. Science tells us how this is possible. So if you want to, feel free to go on to YouTube or wherever you want and type in properties of 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions. According to scientists now, we live in a universe of perhaps 11 dimensions. And so each time you go up a dimension, the possibilities increase exponentially. So what you're seeing here to my right, to your left, to my right, what you're seeing here to my right, this is actually a 4-dimensional cube. So this is just up 1 dimension from 3 dimensions. A 3-dimensional cube is just what you would imagine. It's a 4-sided cube, and that is what we live in. Our universe, the 3-dimensional universe we live in, is actually an infinite cube. Science has come to after doing a bunch of equations, they have come to the realization that our 3D universe is not circular, it's not bent in on itself. Scientists used to wonder if you just went in one direction at an infinite rate of speed, would you eventually end up back where you started? In other words, is this infinite universe just a loop? And what they came to conclude was that the universe was in fact infinite in all directions, but that it was flat, which means it's a cube. It's 3D. That is the nature of 3D. So when you move to 4D, which is just 1 dimension above where we are, you end up with not 8 points. Inside of a cube you have 8 points, and you draw lines between the points and you end up with a cube. 8 points with lines, it gives you 3 dimensions. You have up, down, backwards and forwards, right and left, and that is 3 dimensions. So when you go to 4 dimensions, you don't just add, one little piece. It actually doubles. So this right here is a cube in 4D, and that is what happens when you rotate it. It's not morphing. It's not moving in and out of itself. It's one solid thing that's being rotated, and that's what you see. And in 3 dimensions, it doesn't make any sense. It's very complicated. It's actually twice as many points. Instead of 8 points with lines drawn on them, you have 16. So in the 4th dimension, you have the ability to go anywhere in time. You can be only in one place at one time, if I'm understanding the science correctly. You can't be in multiple places. but you can be anywhere in time. You can go forwards or backwards in time, completely up to you. If you want to go back to the dinosaurs, you can. You want to go up to the end of the universe, you can. So that's what the fourth dimension will do. The reason why I believe that people bought into the phrase moving to 5D is because we actually live in 4 dimensions. We live in a 3-dimensional space, and the 4th dimension is time. So even though you and I live in 3D, we're actually functioning in conjunction with the 4th dimension of time, but we're stuck going in one direction. We can't move backwards or forwards. We're stuck in one timeline that is going forwards. That is 3D space-time. So going to 4D is nicer, but really all that happens is you're still one person stuck in one place at one time, but you can go backwards and forwards in time if you want. Now, I want to clear up something because we're going to talk about 5D and above, and things get really interesting when you start going into higher dimensions. But I want to get rid of a myth. First off, let me just say I fully 100% am on board with human beings are shifting to 5D. I want to be clear about that. We are shifting to 5D. It is happening right now as we speak. As I sit here, I can feel my body shifting on multiple levels. It's almost like if someone were to take a picture of me, you would see my face sort of morphing like that because I can feel myself being pulled into a higher dimension. I have no idea how long that's going to take. I think some of you feel the same way. So I'm completely on board with that. But having said that, if I were to completely morph into 5D, I would disappear. You wouldn't be able to see me, you wouldn't be able to hear me, you wouldn't be able to interact with me. So when people throw around, are you in 5D yet? 10 signs that you're in 5D already. Well, that's not possible if you're interacting in 3D space. It's not possible. Your psyche, your spirit, your mind might be beginning to have parts of yourself go into 5D. You might be able to be thinking more expansively. You might be able to have more ability to love, to love yourself, to love others, to have unconditional love. You notice I'm talking about these because, as I said in the beginning, the only thing that's impossible is narcissistic, destructive, or evil people evolving out of 3D. That's not possible. It can't happen. The reason why it can't happen is because once you go above 3D, the only emotions that survive are emotions of love, tolerance, non-judgment, being able to see the truth, only being able to speak and operate from the truth. None of that can survive beyond that. So there's no false beings of light that you have to worry about when you die. There's no God, there's no demiurge, there's no devil. Any of those beings are at 3D or below, which means you are already more powerful than they are. They are only negative aspects of your dream if you choose to vibrate at that level, and it is your choice. If you choose to drop the fear, if you choose to drop all of the belief systems that keep you in fear, then you will be able to expand to higher dimensions. First and foremost, spiritually, psychologically, and mentally. Right now, what's happening with me is that my brain is being rewired. It's happening, it's been happening ever since a couple of months ago. And I can feel it. I can feel my brain being rewired to intellectually understand these higher dimensions on a spiritual level. All right, so you can't get to 5D if you're in 3D. So if you're wondering, have I made it to 5D yet? Physically, no, you haven't. And here's why. In 4D, as you know, you can be in one space at any time. But you can be in one place, and you can be in any time. You can go backwards and forwards in time, but you're still one person in one place at one time. And even in 4D, if you were in 4D, you would not be seen by people in 3D. You would not be able to interact with people in 3D, except in ways that they wouldn't be able to understand. So let's get into that for a moment. So there's a really great video of Carl Sagan who explains the fourth dimension, and I recommend you go watch it. You can just type it into Google or into YouTube, Carl Sagan, fourth dimension. And he gives a really good explanation of what it would be like for a two-dimensional being to be interacted with by a three-dimensional being. So if you were to sit there and to look at a two-dimensional space with a two-dimensional being, you'd be able to look completely into it. You would be able to see what was going on. You would be able to know what that being was thinking. You would be able to know what they were feeling. You would be able to see what they were going to do, when they were going to do it. You would seemingly have God powers. Just like when you look into a pond and you see fish going into like a tiny stream, and they're entering a tiny stream, you can see ahead where the stream is going, you can see where they came, and you can see their path. And that would be like that if we looked into a 2D world. Now, the most interesting thing about that, and it's interesting that Carl Sagan, again, a physicist, a scientist, I don't know if he was a physicist, he was an astronomer, he explained that if you in 3 dimensions were to communicate with the 2D being, the 2D being would think they were going crazy. Because instead of hearing with their ears your greeting, hello, two-dimensional being, because you're in 3D and they're in 2D, what would happen is your greeting would explode from inside of them. And it would fill the entire room. And it would feel as though God were talking to them. But the crazy part is, it would be in his own voice. So your own voice, you would feel this, hello, two-dimensional being. You would feel it inside of you. It would be this very powerful feeling. And you would hear it in your own voice in your own head. Now, it wouldn't be like you heard a voice in your head. It would be as though you heard yourself and felt yourself say to yourself, hello, two-dimensional being. And you would wonder, did I just think that? Or did something else? And then you would start to wonder if you were losing your mind. And so this is what happens when beings in 5D communicate with us. We think we're losing our mind. Because anybody who says they heard the voice of God rumbling through the clouds, that is an insane person. Or that is somebody who is hearing an evil spirit or some other kind of three-dimensional being. Because if God were to speak to you, it would not be some loud voice around you. It would come from inside of you. And you would wonder, what is this feeling? If a 5-dimensional being wants to communicate a feeling to you, like if let's say a 5D being wants to tell you, I love you. That feeling of love, by the way, is going to be far more intense in the 5th dimension than it is in the 3rd. And when they want to give you that feeling, what will happen is an unbelievably powerful, blissful, orgasmic feeling of love will burst from inside of your chest. You will feel your heart center explode with love, and you won't know where it came from. You will try and figure out, what did I do to make that happen? But it is simply a being in 5D letting you know that they love you. Now, I'm going to tell you something about 5-dimensional beings that I've learned. I'm totally willing to be wrong about this. If time shows that I'm wrong, as I've been done in the past, I will be the first to admit to you that I was wrong. But based on my interactions with them, they preferred past tense, up until now, 5-dimensional or higher beings preferred not to communicate directly with you. And that is because it wasn't meant to be. There are some people who, in fact, every single person, if you're a human being, let me say something, by the way, to make it very clear. Every single human being on this planet has infinite numbers of spirit guides watching over you all the time. You have relationships with spirit guides that you've had for multiple lifetimes, and they are constantly with you, watching you all the time. Instead of interacting with you directly, they will interact with your life stream. And I'll explain to you why they're able to do that. And this again will answer why these beings are able to communicate, like one being, say 5D being. Why is one 5D being able to communicate instantaneously, simultaneously with infinite numbers of consciousness all over the universe? That is the case, and the reason for that I'll explain in a little bit, but you need to know that you are constantly being watched over. But if you are still choosing to operate under 3D, which is your right, by the way, don't think that because we're moving towards 5D that you have to give up living in 3D. You don't. You can live in 3D for as long as you want. If you choose to stay that way, or if that is your proclivity, 5D beings will stay out of your life. They will watch, and they will give you maybe little signs here and there. The clock says 11:11. You'll have a certain animal will walk in front of you. Your life will go in a certain way. Synchronicities will happen. Very rarely will they step in and do something. One time, just to give you an example, one time, this was a couple of years ago, and I won't get into the specifics, but I was looking at starting a friendship with a certain person, and that person came over to my house, and we were talking it over, and I turned around the corner to get, a cup of tea or something like that. And when I turned around the corner, there was some shelves, and there were, items on the shelf. And as I turned around the corner, I could see one of the shelves literally went ba-boom, like somebody lifted it up and dropped it, and there was nobody there. And I understandably kind of went, what the hell just happened? And I knew that somebody was trying to tell me, this is a bad idea. You should not connect with this person. After talking with the person a little more, I was able to be more objective, and I found out some information about them. Then I realized this was a bad idea, and I didn't follow through with that connection. For the longest time, I tried to figure out what that was. Well, now I know. I know who it was, and I know what was going on. It was a 5D being that was communicating with me directly in 3D in the only way that they are able to do that without making me think I'm losing my mind. And that is, in 5D, what they can do. If you watch, what is the name of that movie? There's a sci-fi movie, I keep forgetting the name of it. Matthew McConaughey communicates to his daughter, throughout time. And what you can do in 5D is you can manipulate gravity, you can manipulate other things like that. So you could do things that look like a poltergeist. But the only reason that's happening is that you have the ability to operate with those same properties of physics that bleed over from 5D into 3D. Outside of that, the 5D beings will not communicate with you directly because it will distract you beyond measure. You'll think you're losing your mind. And a lot of people might. It might shatter their reality to such a degree that they might go crazy, or it might make it challenging for them to function. So they didn't. In the past, they did not interact directly with us because of that reason. And so when you were in deep meditation, or when you were dreaming, or sometimes you would get this really wonderful inspiration, or you would have this feeling come over and you would think that you had this brilliant idea, but in reality that's not what it was. What was happening is that a 5D spirit guide was giving you some very important information. You felt really inspired. If you were smart, you wrote it down because you didn't want to forget it. But like many of us, I've done this so many times I can't count. I've had these brilliant flashes of insight and ideas, and I'll go, oh my God, that is so obvious, I'm never going to forget this. And I would forget it. I wake up the next day and I couldn't remember what the hell I was talking about. So whenever you get an inspiration, always write it down, because it's very likely coming from a 5D spirit guide who is giving you information. They can see down the road where you're headed and what you could accomplish. And they are giving you, they're literally thinking into your mind a wonderful idea that you will get excited about. You'll think it's your idea, but it's not. But what is happening now as we go into 5D is that the beings of 5D and above are now beginning to break the dimensional barrier. This is why there's an increase in UFOs. True extraterrestrials are not, what we generally think of as these guys coming in and doing medical experiments on you. That is not an extraterrestrial. There are beings that do that, but they are created and farmed and formed by humans. Those are human created android robot, half alien, half human robot. That's a whole other subject. True ETs that visit Earth are on higher dimensions. And they only show up in spaceships when they absolutely have to. The rest of the time, they simply take their 5D presence and they sort of they just sort of peek in to third dimension, and you see them as orbs or flashing lights or some strange thing in the sky. And those are the higher dimensional beings. Those are actually beings of light, what our ancestors called the elves, the fairies, light beings, angels. That's what they are. And they are now actively pushing past the 3D barrier to get people's attention. Because the more people that start realizing that there are higher dimensions of being, and that we can achieve that, the faster we will evolve. The faster we will be able to make the shift to be comfortable in this Earth that we live in now, which before 2012 was in a completely different part of the galaxy, twice as far away from the galactic center, and much more dense. That was, if you want to live in 3D, the best place to do it is at the outskirts of the galaxy. If you want to live in 5D, then the closer you get to the center of the galaxy, the easier it becomes. So we as a species and as a planetary system, because the whole solar system and surrounding star systems came with us. Somebody's been trying to tell me on YouTube something about there was a break in the Sagittarius arm or something like that. And I think people are hinting that that's where we used to be. And when we left, we broke the arm and took a bunch of stars with us. But what that means is that our entire solar system and all of the surrounding stars, which are seen in the 12 houses of astrology, that all of those star constellations and our solar system is actually one unit. It is one organism. And that entire organism has decided that it's time to move up the next evolutionary step in the ladder, and we got pulled along with it because we are part of the organism of Mother Earth, who is part of this larger organism called our solar system and our astrological system of stars. That's one organism. And that is one organism inside another larger organism called the Milky Way Galaxy. That Milky Way Galaxy is one organism in a much larger body of organisms. And if you want to look at the whole universe as one giant organism, then feel free to do that. If that's too much for your brain, like it is for me, then you can take it back. Just take one bite at a time, whatever you can handle. So back to the question, how is it that these beings are able to communicate simultaneously with infinite numbers of people? How can one person do that? Well, you will be able to do that. When you actually get to the fifth dimension, which probably won't be in this lifetime, you will have to reincarnate a few times in a higher dimension before you get there. Or maybe when you leave this life, it's also very possible. When you leave this life, you could go straight into a higher dimension. A lot of people who are alive today are actually from higher dimensions, and they've chosen to incarnate at this crucial time. Many of you who've had the worst possible lives you could imagine, those of you who have gone through unbelievable pain and sorrow, are actually beings from higher dimensions who have chosen to really build up their strength. You know, if you want to become stronger physically, you have to go to the gym and you have to lift weights that are beyond your comfortable capacity to lift. Well, that's what your spirit did when you came here. If you came here, especially if you had a difficult life, you can be guaranteed there's a good chance that you are from a higher dimension. As I said, in 3D, you already know what that's like. In 4D, it's like 3D, but you can go anywhere in time. 5D, things start to change. In 5D, you can do infinite numbers of things simultaneously. So in 5D, if you want to be a policeman, a banker, a scientist, a porn star, a movie star, a singer, a construction worker, an accountant, you can do literally as many different jobs as you want, all at the same time. You wake up in the morning, you go to 1,000 different jobs. You can do that. You can be simultaneously talking to any person you want at any given time. So how is it then? Each one of us has a personal guardian angel, according to some traditions. You have personal higher selves. You have personal spirit guides that work with you specifically. Now, it might be easy to think that there's a spirit guide and it's just one and they're assigned to you. So they just spend all day walking around with you, following you, giving you advice, and then they go home and that's all that they do is they just deal with one person. Nope. Your spirit guide is completely 100% totally connected to you intimately in every way you can possibly imagine, and is simultaneously in infinite numbers of places with infinite numbers of beings. They could be with their own spirit guides who live on higher dimensions, and they could be learning. They could be creating a planet in another universe. They could be working directly with you and with your past self and your future self simultaneously. They could be working they've got the same relationship going on with the guy next door or somebody 100 miles away. And it's only one being. It's only one being, and they live in a dimension where that's possible. They can live in any, now, unlike in 4D and 5D, you can live in multiple time streams at the same time. You can have 100 versions of yourself back with the dinosaurs and 100 versions of yourself in future times, in the present times. You can do anything you want. Your spirit guide can decide to simultaneously, and I've had this happen to me, and it's real trippy when you realize that that's what just happened. But I've had experiences where I was simultaneously getting the same message from the same being in two different points in my life. Something that happened to me when I was 7 and just happened to me, a couple weeks ago, was actually one moment in time for one 5D being who said, hey, guess what? X, Y, and Z. And I got that message here in this time in my life, and I got it when I was 7 years old. It was the same message. I didn't understand it when I was 7, because I was only 7. And I understood it now, and it explained everything between then and now. This is the kind of powers that 5D beings have, which is what we're talking about when we talk about guardian angels, spirit guides, deities, light beings, extraterrestrials. This is what we're talking about. And here's the good news. The good news is you will have this power. If you were to instantly go to 5D exactly as you are, you would have all those powers. Not because of anything you did, but simply because you're in a different dimension where that happens. In our 3D space, we can only deal with up, down, left, right, backwards and forwards, going forwards in time. That's all we're capable. No matter how brilliant or spiritual or beautiful, that's the most we'll ever experience. We can't go beyond that, except in altered states of consciousness. But if you were magically brought into 5D, once you acclimated, you would go, oh, I can do infinite numbers of things. And it wouldn't be difficult. It would be normal. Be completely normal for you. So what is happening is that these beings that are now in higher dimensions, 5D and above, these beings are now actively sort of opening up the veil between the higher dimensions and the third dimension. And they're doing it specifically so that we will change the way that we think, number one, about reality, number two, about our relationship to reality, and also to help us understand and get rid of religion and superstition. Because what we experience in 3D as religion is nothing more than a being on a higher dimension interacting with us. But because it's so far beyond what we can understand, we turn it into a religion. We worship. Imagine if your next door neighbor or your best friend magically got to 5D. They wouldn't be able to interact with you the same way, but they still cared about you, and they did all kinds of things. And if you asked your friend, hey, can you give me $1 million? And the next thing you know, $1 million shows up, boom, on your table. And you're like, oh my God, my friend's become a god. No, he's just in 5D, and being able to do that is nothing for him. It's no different than you being able to do anything you do in 3D. And the energy level is, off the charts. The emotions are off the charts. The love and the bliss and the peace off the charts. But that's simply because that's what happens in those dimensions. And so the only thing you need to understand is that if you indulge in the lower vibrational things, fear, anger, insecurity, self-hatred, judgment of others, that's going to keep you in 3D. That's it. So if you don't want that, then do what every single spiritual path in history has said, which is forgive those that have hurt you, do not judge anybody, love yourself, tell the truth, be open and vulnerable, be authentic, be fearless in the face of criticism, and do only that which you know is good for you and good for others. Have no fear. Know that you are an infinite being, and if you were to lose contact with this three-dimensional body, your spirit would continue on. The same thing that every spiritual path has always taught. Focus on those things and make that how you live your life. And when it's time, you will have no problem shifting from 3D to 5D, because that's where we're headed. These extraterrestrial light beings do live on other planets, but those planets are conscious beings who themselves live in higher dimensions. So if you are an ET and you're born on Zeta Reticuli or wherever this guy's from, if you're born on that planet, simply by being born on that planet, you are in whatever higher dimension they live in. And that's why they can travel faster than the speed of light. That's why they can read your thoughts. That's why they can appear and disappear and be in multiple places. It's because that's what happens when you're born on whatever planet he's from, because that planet, the consciousness that is that planet is in that higher dimension. So Mother Earth has her roots in higher dimensions, and she has chosen, up until now, she has chosen to create, her surface is a three-dimensional plane of existence. And she has chosen to give that three-dimensional plane of existence to souls who want to incarnate and experience a very physical life. Because this is a tremendous learning ground for higher dimensional beings. If they really want to learn, they come here to learn. They limit themselves and they lift those spiritual weights, which is living in 3D. So does that clear up some things? Hopefully this is where we're going, taking some of the superstition out of all of it, and just realizing that what's happening is that we're just having a different interaction with the laws of science. It turns out our understanding of reality is shifting. Time is not solid. The past changes. Our reality shifts and changes. It's not what we thought. The planets and the stars are actually conscious beings that live as organisms, and they can travel wherever they want in the universe. If Mother Earth decided to go to a completely different galaxy, then the Earth would just up and move. She would take herself to that galaxy if she wanted to, and we would wake up one day and all of a sudden we would be in a different galaxy. But instead, she just decided to move, same neighborhood, same city, the Milky Way Galaxy. She decided to move to a different neighborhood closer to downtown. And so as a result of that, you have access to stronger energy coming from the center of the galaxy, which we could very easily mistake for being God. All right, there's my lecture for tonight. I'm happy to take any questions. I prefer questions. If you have a question, write the word question in all caps and then just write your question. If you have a feeling, you can share that. I can't stop you from sharing your opinion. I tend to psychoanalyze people if they share opinions, because usually when people dump their opinion, their ego is attached to it, and then I get to see all of your failings that I might be able to help you with. So the best way to interact with higher dimensional beings is to ask honest questions and to be honest about your feelings. If you try and interact with these kind of beings, and you start dumping your opinion on them, you're not going to get very far. So that's why I do things like that on my channel. Let me take a look and see what do we got here. Thundra says hello. She has a website, thundra.therapy. thunderwizard.com. You can go check that out, thundra.thunderwizard.com. And you will be able to get a astrological reading based on the kinds of Vedic astrology that I do, which I believe will give you the best reading for your entire life, as opposed to many readings which just tell you what's going to happen next week or last year or something like that. You can also go to vincent.thunderwizard.com. He's on here. He's also one of my astrologers. And the same thing. He's got a bunch of things he can offer as well on his website, vincent.thunderwizard.com. Let's see. Squirrel Monkman says, hello. Nelly, question. I think I know who you are. Should we connect to our higher self before sending loving energy to the quantum field when doing the Hula breath? I don't know that it makes a difference, but let me walk myself through your question. So you're saying, should we connect to our higher self before we send loving energy to the quantum field? There's nothing wrong with that. I kind of don't know why you would need to, because the quantum field is also the same quantum field your higher self is tapping into. So the quantum field is the higher self for everything. Your higher self's higher self is the quantum field. But, I mean, follow your instincts. If that's the way you want to do it, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Okay. Buddy Helm, honest feeling. Well, is that really a feeling? It's a very kind thing to say. You say, I am one of your favorite humans, one of the most helpful beings on this planet. That is a very kind thing to say, and that makes me feel good. Yeah, thanks. That makes me a little embarrassed, but hey, I'll take the compliment. Thank you. Interstellar, right. The movie Interstellar. So if you want to see how a higher dimensional being can interact with you, it's not exactly accurate. And in fact, in the movie, they quantify it because they say that whatever the beings are created a 3-dimensional space in a 4D hypercube, which allowed him to see his daughter in multiple times from childhood to adulthood. He was able to see her in all different times, and he was able to communicate through symbolic gestures and doing poltergeist kinds of things to get her attention. But actually, as he's yelling at her, he's yelling her name. The reality is, if he had done that, she would have felt that come from inside of her. So in the movie Interstellar, she doesn't hear him. But if you were in a 4D hypercube and you saw your daughter in multiple timelines and you said, hey, daughter, your daughter would feel this very powerful communication coming from her, and she wouldn't know if she was losing her mind or not. So that's the only thing that would be different. Casey Jones, you've been on my channel, right? I think you've been on my channel. You know the drill. Please follow my parameters so that I see your question, because if I don't see your question, you're going to get mad at me, and then I'm going to get mad at you because you didn't do what I asked. So write the word question in all caps. You say, what if they control the information? Who are they? You need to be more specific. And what information are you talking about? You need to be more specific. Right off the bat, I feel a ton of fear coming from your question. A ton of insecurity. You'd be better off in this moment saying, talking about this makes me feel very insecure. I don't trust these beings. That's really what the feeling is. The question, you're intellectualizing what that feeling is. You're afraid. You feel vulnerable. You feel vulnerable that something higher than you can control you. So I don't know what the hell that means. What if they control the information? What information are we talking about? You say, what if this is evidence of how easy it is to manipulate your mind? I mean, if you want to go down that path, go ahead. And you're going to get what you get from that. But I can already tell, Casey, you haven't had the experience. Because if you had, you wouldn't be asking this question. And bear in mind, everything is a projection. Meaning, go look up, if anybody watching, if you don't know what the definition of psychological projection is, go look it up. So psychological projection is when we have a thought or a feeling about ourselves that we either aren't aware of or can't tolerate, we will project it onto others. So you have now projected onto beings you don't know anything about, that you haven't experienced. You have already projected onto them something you might do, which is out of your own fear, you would manipulate somebody to stay safe or control the information. Now, this shows a basic misunderstanding of you didn't listen to what I was saying. So I want you to take that part of your brain that's afraid, put it aside for a minute, take a deep breath, and I want you to listen to me as I go back and tell you what I already said earlier in the video. First thing I said in the beginning of this video was that it is impossible for narcissistic people to function in higher dimensions. And that's because of science, because of the physics of how energy works. In higher dimensions, because they're not trapped in 3D, in 3D you can hide. In 3D you can lie. You can't do that in higher dimensions. When you're in a higher dimension, every being knows exactly what your motives are, what you are thinking, what you are feeling. You are not a secret to anybody. So the idea that somehow they're going to then be able to do that to you shows your fear, and it shows your basic fundamental assumption about yourself. And it's a sad thing because it means you don't feel loved. You believe that the universe is your enemy. Now, I understand that. That probably came from childhood. I don't know anything about you, but I'm willing to bet you didn't have a very close, loving, trusting relationship with your mother and or your father. I'm willing to bet you have mommy and daddy issues like most of us do. And you project that not only onto your world, but onto higher beings who are going to, for some reason, why would they do this? Why would they want to manipulate you? You're on a lower level of existence. Why are they going to take time out of their blissful 5D existence just to go and fuck with you? What do they have to gain by doing that? See what I mean? So, Casey Jones, I know you're not new to my channel, but it tells me that you haven't watched a lot of what I teach. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But it also tells me perhaps you're not doing the energy practices. You're probably not subscribed to the Lightning Qigong up here at thunderwizard.com. You're probably not doing those energy practices that help you become aware of your own unconscious fears and pains and releasing them. It's possible you are, but more than likely it tells me that you're not, because I can tell from the moment you write a question, I can tell if you're in fear or not. And you're in fear. That's okay. I'm showing it to you. So listen to what I say, and if you choose to, you can follow my suggestions, which is number one, drop all of the fear, trust the universe, love yourself unconditionally, and then you put yourself in a position to shift to a higher dimension. If you operate from fear and you think somebody has it in for you, that's what you will create. You will create a three-dimensional environment where beings more powerful than you are going to manipulate you and do all kinds of other things. It's completely up to you how you want to interact with this higher dimensional stuff, okay? Don't take that personally. I'm just sharing with you what I see. Autumn Rust, I love the picture behind you. Who is the artist? I have no idea. I bought it off of, it's not a picture, it's a hanging. I got it off of, did I get it off of Etsy? I think I got it off of Etsy. Anyway, and I just put it up today. I've had it for a while. What else? What other questions do we have here? Propagate this light. Question. You don't need to put at thunderwizard.com because what I'm looking for is the word question. That's the thing. That the closer it is to your name, the easier I'll see it. I appreciate the effort, though. Propagate this light. Question. I stream about your topic. Is it possible for me to... Oh, you asked me that before, didn't you? And I responded that I wasn't ready because you wanted to talk about the, whatchamacallit, the Mandela Effect. So anyway, I don't know that I'm ready right now to go ahead and do that again. I'm still kind of working through some things, but keep in touch. And yeah, I'm open to the idea, but not today. So keep in touch. Caleb Spears, honest feeling. I feel loved and supported. Since the last stream, I felt the love Mother Earth has for me, us. So let's talk about that. This is an assumption. What he's talking about is based on an assumption. And it's a new assumption that is new to 3D. It is an assumption that everybody in 5D feels without even thinking about it. They don't have to think about it. The other thing that's going to happen when you get to 5D is that you won't have to read books or educate yourself about the nature of the universe. We have to do that now because we are in the age of the animal. So 3 dimensions is perfect if you're an animal. And as is evidenced by my ears, I am descended from a primate. I'm an animal. Human beings have only really been conscious in, any real sense, probably for 100,000 years if we're lucky. So we're just now coming out of our diaper phase. We're now heading into toddlerhood when it comes to being a conscious being. We have been living in 3D because that's the best place for animals to exist. And animals operate from their reptilian brainstem, which is you're either eating it, having sex with it, running away from it, or trying to, hide from it, or, that's basic, instincts, basic survival instincts. You start from an assumption that everything else is out to eat you, kill you, manipulate you, mate with you. Those are your basic animal instincts that we all have. So that's why we have needed things like religions to tell us that God loves us and the universe this and all that. And we have to learn about, the 10 Commandments because our instincts operate from a completely different assumption. Our instincts operate from the assumption that the earth we walk on is a thing. It's a lifeless rock. We operate from the assumption that the light that shines down on us from the sun is just some sort of, happenstance of, a bunch of gas coming together and then creating this, this fusion reaction which creates this light. Those are the assumptions that we've had. But when you move to higher dimensions, you then see, nobody has to tell you because you can see it and you can feel it, that everything is conscious. That every being, every star that you see when you look in the sky is actually a conscious being. It is a conscious being that is projecting light into 3D from a higher dimensional place. And whenever you have any object come into 3-dimensional space from a higher dimension, it will always be in the shape of a sphere. That's why stars are spheres. That's why planets are spheres. Because planets and stars are higher dimensional beings that are just simply, sticking their pinky into the 3D. And when they do, when they just barely come into 3D, it will always be in the shape of a sphere. So that means anything that you see spherical off of our planet is a being of consciousness from a higher dimension. And so when you understand that, then you're not surprised that the Earth has moved 73,000 miles, 2012, and that everything that comes out of the ground, the oxygen in the air, the plants that come around, the fish, the warm air, the clouds, the smell of the flowers, all of these things are done consciously for you, so that you will have a fun experience in your dream, your three-dimensional dream that you're having. When you get closer into 5D, you realize that there's no such thing as death, that the nature of the universe is bliss and love, and that we're actually in kind of a weird little place where we don't have that because we're so dense we can't feel it. But these things that we used to have to learn in church and in meditation school and things like that about the universe loves you and the earth is Mother Gaia, you know, when you get closer to 5D, you can actually see and feel. And so it's good to operate from that. So if you want to have that experience more strongly, worship any feminine deity, whether it's Kali or Freja or Lakshmi, you know, depending on your chart, will give you a better idea of which feminine deity to worship. And all of the planets, again, our solar system, our sun, and all of the planets and all of the stars that surround it is one giant living organism. And you live in that living organism in the same way that the cells of your body live inside of your body. And your entire universe loves you. There's nothing around you that doesn't ooze infinite love for you. Now, you may not feel that in 3D. That's okay. But if you just assume it, just choose to believe it. You don't have to feel it. Just choose to believe it and act as though it's true. And when you do that, the more you do that, the happier you make your mother. Imagine if you've got a little kid and you're a mother and your little kid is afraid of you and won't let you pick your child up and, you know, won't let you hug it and won't let you touch it. I mean, that would be very sad. The mother would be very sad. She wouldn't be able to give love to her child. Well, that's what happens when you live in fear. When you live in fear and you think, as people have understandably asked, well, how do we know they're not manipulating us? Like they've got nothing better to do than fuck with you. That's fear. And so these higher beings want to love you and they can't because you won't let them. And you're running around with these crazy, paranoid, delusional thoughts. Now, it's understandable because other animals in 3D are operating from the same thing, so they can be hurtful. But then again, you've got a mom and you've got two kids and they're fighting with each other. You know, normally they come running to mommy, but imagine these two kids fight with each other and then decide that mommy's out to get them too. And so they fight with each other and they fight with their mother. That's a horrible thing. I mean, a very sad mother walking around. So what Caleb is talking about is that he has, I don't know what has happened. Maybe he's had experiences where he's seen into that. It could just be that he's bought into that assumption or a combination of those two. And the end result is when you act as though your mother loves you deeply, unconditionally, and infinitely, and you live your life that way, it makes her happy. When your mom gives you a sweater for your birthday and you wear it on Mother's Day, that there's nothing that makes her more happy than knowing that you have taken her gift and you are using it. This life is a gift. And if you choose to enjoy it, what'll happen is, if you buy into this mentality, what'll happen is when you go out into nature The birds will fly over you. The butterflies will fly. The light will catch you just the right way. The wind will bring the wafting of the flowers, and everything around you will support you and surround you with love, because your mother, your earth, will feel your love because you've allowed her to love you. You see how devastatingly destructive fear-based mentality is? That's why it's so destructive. You end up hurting the mother that's given life to you. What else? Timothy Zoll question. Visited my acupuncturist and asked about the results of energy work. It was suggested that I try what? Chi charging cell phone. Haven't tried it yet, but I don't know what that is. Does that mean you take your cell phone and you try and use your chi to power it? I've never done that. I don't know why somebody would suggest that other than just for fun. I don't know if that works or not. If it did, to me, it would be a waste of my energy, because I have, a cell phone charger that will do that for me. I don't know why he's asking. I don't understand the thought process. Electricity is not chi, by the way. So if he's saying that if he's conflating chi with electricity, we can create electricity in our body, but that's, forgive me for saying so, that's low level stuff. And there's multiple types of energy. So I think your acupuncturist is having a very basic, understanding, and is conflating life force energy with electricity. And that's okay. A lot of people feel that way. But there's all different kinds of energy that we create with our qigong. So there's qigong, there's neigong, there's shengong. What we do is also, we could call it Shin Gong. There's Yi Gong. So all of these things go under the category of Qi Gong, but they're different energies. So anyway, I'm giving you my honest answer. It sounds kind of ridiculous and childish to me, and it shows to me somebody who may not completely understand what they're talking about. Oh, he says, I think he was, so just to let you know, Timothy, if you use a cuss word, YouTube will block it out. So I approved it. All right. So okay. So that makes sense. He was screwing with it. I don't know. It sounds like kind of a destructive communication, unless I wasn't there, so I don't know, but he may not completely understand what you're doing or what you're talking about. He may, because the vast majority of people who do Qigong are not aware, educated in some of the stuff that I teach you here. There are people who do Qigong who have never heard of Shen Gong. There are people who do Shen Gong, in fact, the vast majority have never heard of Shin Gong, that have never heard of Yi Gong, intent, Shin Gong. Life force, not life force, the lightning center of the heart. In fact, it's very possible your acupuncturist doesn't even know about it. He might have heard about it or read it in a book, but doesn't know how to tap into it and release it. So, anyway, I haven't gone into the education of that, but that's because I've learned things the hard way. I didn't learn things through books. But there's Qi, which is life force energy, which is basic Qigong. Whenever you inhale, exhale, you're doing life force energy work. When you do just basic, Qigong movements, you're just working with life force energy. I mean, not just, you're working with life force energy. There's Shen Gong, which is working with the soul energy inside the heart. There's Yi Gong, which is intent, where you learn how to create and use your intent to create reality. There's, of course, the Shin Gong, which is the heart mind, the lightning energy, which is a higher dimensional force. It is not Qi. It is something from... Qi is a 3D thing. Shin is a 4 or 5 dimensional thing. So this is what gave the spirit fighters, when you see me over on the side here, over here, you see me doing the weird things that I'm doing. That's actually a form of Shin Gong, which is I'm working with the 8 directions that you see happening here in this 4D cube. The 8 directions tap into the 4th and the 5th dimension. And so the energy that comes from that is going to be different from Qi, which is why the spirit fighters were so feared. Just to give you an example, you guys are learning, if you're at thunderwizard.com and you're learning the lightning qigong, you are learning something that that Chinese qigong masters were deathly afraid of, because they didn't understand it. This was way back this was in the 90s. So this had to have been 92 or 93 when I first started learning this. And I was learning these, the maoshan.thunderwizard.com. I was learning this stuff you see me doing here. And I was learning it as a martial art. And I found out very quickly that people who did this martial art were literally untouchable. Like if you tried to attack them, you couldn't. And if they wanted to attack you, there was nothing you could do to stop them. And it was, when somebody would just come up and tap you with this energy. Like when the first time I felt it, my teacher, I have it in my books. If you haven't read my books, you can go to courses.thunderwizard.com. I write about it in one of my books. I don't remember which. But the first time he came up and he said, I'm just going to tap you. And he said, I'm just going to do this. And he just did this in the air. And then he tapped me like that. And I felt an energy explode inside of my body that I'd never felt before. It was a spiritual energy that rocked my whole body. My bones shook. And it also, I felt him, it felt like he screamed at my soul. I felt my energy body come out of my physical body for a brief second, because it was just so frightening. And it took everything inside of me to stay standing there. I wanted to turn around and run out the door like a little girl. And I had no idea what that was about. Well, now I do. He was putting a 5D energy into a 3-dimensional body. And I could take a punch. If a normal boxer had come up, I could have tightened up and I would have been able to take that punch. But just to have some guy just tap me like that and have my whole insides, feel like they were exploding, and my spirit feel like it got screamed at by God, and that stuff isn't normal. It's not normal what was happening there, and that is not qigong. So I was experiencing that, and I went to. He called it Tao. So I thought, oh, I'm practicing Taoist martial arts. I thought all Taoist martial arts did this. I didn't know. We talked about Qi and we talked about energy, so I thought it was all the same. And they were telling me it's totally different. And I was like, I just don't think so. That sounds like an ego thing. I just don't think so. I think probably it's all the same. So I'm driving around in North Hollywood, and I see this studio called the Taoist Institute of North Hollywood. I don't know if it's still there or not. And I went, oh, and I said, I got to go check that out. So I went over and I knocked on the door, and the Taoist abbot came and opened the door, and I said, wow, I'm really interested. And he invited me in, and there's a whole story behind that, but he invited me in and come check it around and take a look at it. And I said, what do you teach? And he talked about all the classes. And I said, wow, this is great. I've just started practicing Tao just a little while ago. And he goes, oh, really? What sect? And I said, Maoshan. And his face, and he says, That stuff is dangerous. That stuff will kill you. Demons will jump inside your body. You'll be very powerful, but demons will jump inside your body and kill you. You should never do that. He said, my Taoist master in China once saw a Mao Shan guy come out of the mountains, and the stuff that he did scared the pants off of him. You need to be very careful about that. You know, I didn't know. I was just this little 20-something. I didn't know what the hell he was. So I go back to my teacher and I tell about it, and he laughs and laughs, and he says, I keep telling you this is different. Don't go talking to other Taoists. Don't tell, especially Chinese people, don't tell them about what you're doing. They're going to get so afraid. They don't understand. And it's because this was the original Taoist monastery. The Mao Shan was the first one. And so they kept secret high-level stuff to themselves. All of the other Taoist mountains, Wudangshan, Huashan, all of the other big famous Taoist mountains, everything they learned came from Mao Shan. But it doesn't mean they learned everything that the Mao Shan had. And so there's a difference between Qi, there's a difference between Shen, there's a difference between Xin, Yi. These are all different levels of energy. And so, you know, if somebody, the average guy who just does Qigong, even if they come off of the mountain, even if they come off of Wudangshan, which, by the way, none of the mountains have any real power anymore. All the power's gone out of the mountains since the communist takeover. But even if you went back in time and had the Wudangshan master come out of the mountain, and no matter how powerful he was, if you started doing something with the heart mind, he would become afraid, because that's a power he's never experienced, and he knows it's more powerful than he is. That's why the Mao Shan were always ridiculed. You know, this is documented. If, let's say, Wudangshan, let's say that they found a cave that was haunted by a demon. And the demon was going around and causing problems, you know, poltergeisting and hurting people and cursing and all that kind of stuff. They would go to Mao Shan. That's the first place they would go. They would send somebody to Mao Shan Mountain and say, we have a demon problem. Can you guys come and help? And they would go with gifts, and they would go with money, and they would treat the Mao Shan guy with ultimate respect. The Mao Shan guy would come and he would do this kind of stuff, and he would kick that demon back to where he came from. And then they would thank him, give him gifts, send him back on his way. And as soon as they were gone, they would badmouth him and say how evil those Mao Shan people are. Well, you have to be evil to fight evil. They'd say that kind of stuff because they didn't have access to it. So just to let you know the kind of power you're dealing with here. I'm not kidding around when I tell you that almost nobody knows of this Shin power. Almost nobody. I'm not kidding around when I tell you when you do stuff like the Awakening the Immortals Qigong, which is the free thing. I'm not kidding around when I say that the kind of energy that you're tapping into in that is stuff that is far beyond the most powerful Taoist masters of 100, 200 years ago on whatever Taoist mountain you want. I am not kidding around about that. It's taken me 30 years to figure that out through a bunch of research and reverse engineering and putting together all the things that I've run into and the people I've talked to. And, you know, I was this brand new Mao Shan practitioner, and I scared a Taoist abbot. So you've got monks and then you've got abbots, right? That's above that. What I didn't tell you is that when I went back to that same Taoist abbot a couple weeks later, because I wanted to take classes from him. I came because I wanted to take his meditation classes. I knew his martial arts were different, and I didn't want to learn that, but I wanted to learn his meditation. And I was a very respectful student, and I walked up to the door, you know, and it was a glass door. I could see him in his office. He could see me. And I knocked on the door, and he looked over and he saw me, and he went back to whatever he was doing, pretending he didn't see me. And out of respect, I stood there for probably 10 minutes. And I stood there out of respect waiting for him, because that's what you do. And he opened the door just a crack, and he said, "What?" And I was shocked. I was like, this same guy had just taken me in to his studio and shown me around and gave me flyers, and now he's treating me like shit. It's like, what the hell? And he goes, "What?" And I said, and I pointed to a flyer. I said, "Do you teach that class here?" And he says, "Yes." And then he's just blocking his way. It was just totally opposite. And I said, "Okay, I guess that's all I have." It was really clear I wasn't welcome, so I turned around and walked away. It was very hurtful. But it's really clear that he had talked to his Sifu in China, who had told him, "This guy is evil, he has evil spirits, don't let him in. Don't let him into your place." He thought I was a fucking vampire or something. I am not kidding around when I tell you guys this is most likely the most powerful stuff on the planet. Very unlikely you're going to find anybody that has access to this. So, take it or leave it, don't. But the reason it is so powerful, I now know, is because these movements tap you into higher dimensional forces that are beyond anything in 3D. Chi power is 3D. Shin power, 5D and above. So, and if you want that, go to thunderwizard.com, subscribe to the Lightning Qigong, and you can start learning that. If you want the high level stuff, you can go to maoshan.thunderwizard.com and learn these sets that I'm doing here, and you'll know from experience what I'm talking about. You won't have to think about it. You won't have to ask questions. You'll know. And when you go to people who do, when you go to Chinese medicine practitioners and acupuncturists, a lot of them aren't going to understand what the hell you're talking about, because they're just dealing with the lowest level of Chinese energy and understanding. And if you do, they might get a little weirded out, and they might get a little offended, or they might get a little intimidated, and they might make jokes. Maybe that's not what happened with you, but it's possible it did. He was making jokes because he didn't understand and might have been a little intimidated by it. There are some people that are practicing this that they tell me that they walk into places and people just get freaked out and walk away. And those are people, I can guarantee you, those are people that are in really low density thought patterns, and or they've got spirits around them. So if you do this stuff and you go into a haunted house, all the ghosts will run out. If you walk into a place where there's somebody who's got a spirit attached to them, that person will get up and leave. I've seen that happen with me more times than I can count. So again, I'm not kidding around. You want the real stuff? I don't know any other place that you can go online and find it besides me. There's other people that know this stuff, but most of them don't publicly. They have small classes they teach. They don't teach it publicly. I'm the only person that I know of that's teaching it publicly. All right, what else? Is that it? That's it. No other questions. Well, I just did a big advertisement for this. So we're coming up on the end of the month, right? This is the 26th. So if you go to thunderwizard.com and you click around and you subscribe to the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong, I will give you this month off, because you're going to get charged again almost nothing. I don't know why everybody isn't. I don't know why people choose not to spend, tiny bit of money every month to get it. I don't understand it. But if you sign up, I will give you this month's subscription back, because you'll get charged again at the first of the month. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe whenever you want. What have you got to lose? All right. I don't see any other questions. Nothing else. No more questions. Okay, that's it. So continue to do your meditations, my suggestion to everybody, no matter what level you're at, meditate every day and do energy work every day, whether that's yoga, tai chi, qigong, deep breathing, I don't care. Do energy work and meditation every day, because the energy levels at the 5D level is unbelievable, and you will need that energy to make a smooth shift into the 5D, as we are already doing. And whether you do it through me or through somebody else, I don't care, but you will make me happy if the more people that meditate and do energy work, the better it is for me and for every other conscious being in the universe. So you're doing me a favor every time that you meditate and do energy work. So that's it for me. I don't see any other questions, so that's it. I'll leave it at that. I wish you guys all the best. I will see you all next time. Take care.